All right, so Q1 planning. So some of the things that we're going to be taking out are out of these two books right here. So I read these books in the sequence, and I felt like they were meant to be together. So, if you're not a reader, then you're probably going to want to pick one or the other. But, if you're somebody, so I had somebody ask, well, when am I going to have time to read a book? You might not have time to read a book, but maybe while you're packing or you're doing dishes or you're doing laundry, instead of watching The Real Housewives, maybe you put on an audiobook. And so we have one client that, she just started doing that during the dishes. She just works, she's doing her dishes and then she listens to an audiobook. And so there's a couple books that she really wanted to get because there's some things that she wanted to implement in her business. And she was able to do that by that. But these are the two books that, a lot of the concept came from. I want to make sure I give credit where credit is due. So oftentimes when I talk to sellers who are reaching out to me for a consult and they're looking at maybe mentoring or coaching, and we've coached hundreds and hundreds of clients over the years. And one of the things that we see is, a lot of times they had really good growth early on. So maybe the first year or two, they had really, really fast growth, or they had really good initial sales, but then they got stuck. So they found themselves working harder and harder than they ever had before, but they're getting results, but they're just still not getting the results that they want to. The other kind of people that reach out to us sometimes are, they might not have that problem. Sometimes it's that, they've consistently hit or surpassed their sales goals. And by everybody else's measure, they're completely successful. In fact, their friends say, well, you must not have any problems anymore because, you've done something that so few people have done. You have a successful business. You should be so proud. They don't feel proud. They feel like everything's going to fall apart. They feel like, things are not under control. They're worried. They feel stressed out, and they're tired and frustrated. So there's a lot of people in a lot of different spaces. Some people are just getting started, all of those things. So if you're getting started, tonight is going to not be specifically about you. So I want you to listen, because you're going to build these things into your long-term plan. But the key to getting started is to get started. So if you're listening to this because you're going to start Amazon soon as you figure it out, my challenge to you is to stop trying to figure it out and you need to go do it. The only way to learn this business is to go do it. So it's really about consistent action, because the biggest pitfalls are, that we see people who kind of have false starts, or they get stuck and then they find their business start to decline, is they jump from business model to business model, or they get really excited about a bunch of ideas, but they never actually execute on those ideas. And then the other one is analysis paralysis. They spend so much time researching. So if you're spending more time in spreadsheets and courses, and I say that even as somebody who sells courses, then you are actually on the court playing, building your business, then that could come and get you in the end. We want to make sure that you're focused on building your business. So in the beginning, I would say 80% action, 10% refinement, and making sure that the things that you're doing are getting you the results that you want. And then 10% is about research and learning. So you're going to watch 2 or 3 videos, and then you're going to spend 5 or 6 hours actually executing the things from those videos. Don't watch the entire course and then try to go do it at the end. You're not even going to remember all the pieces. So how do you get predictable results? Because that's why you guys came, right? Is how do you make growth predictable? So these are the things that we're going to be covering in this webinar. And so we want to make sure that you know where you're going. And we're not going to spend a lot of time on this because it can get a little woo-woo, but you need to know where you're going, and you need to be really clear on what is going to drive that growth in your business. The next piece is the piece that I think is missing from a lot of businesses, and that's finding a lever. And when you find that lever, so you're going to consistently apply force on that lever. When I say a lever, I really mean just like this. You're going to find something that when you apply force causes a result in your business. And pushing on that lever and really focusing on the lever and not focusing on all the other things that are around it. I talk to a lot of sellers that sometimes they get stuck in all of the things to do. And as they're looking at their to-do list, they like, what should I do next? They look at the next easy to check off thing on their list. When in reality, we want to look at the list of everything that you have to do and then say, what are the revenue producing activities? What are the most critical thing that needs to get done first? And we need to prioritize our time, because revenue producing activities need to come first, then things that are going to keep money from leaking out of your business. And then we're going to be looking at long-term strategy. And then only after that do we get some of the things that, we're playing around with new ideas and things like that. Save that for your dessert. So if we want to know where we're going, there's a hint to getting to that. So a goal, even a SMART goal, so people will talk about SMART goals, like specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-oriented. In fact, if you go back to our first Q4 bootcamp in 2015, we talked a lot about SMART goals. But, over the several years that we've started to really realize that SMART goals in and of themselves aren't enough. So, outside of the SMART goals, we have to look at some other things as well, because having the goal is not a point. Anybody can have a goal, but setting the goal is really just like, if you had Google Maps, or if you had, Apple Maps open, that is like typing in the address. So when you get this little bar, this little thing here that tells you where that is, that's what setting the goal is. You're just putting the pin in the map. Putting the pin in the map isn't going to actually help you get to the destination. You have to press that root go button. And once you press that button, then you actually have to do what she tells you to do. Just by pushing the button and listening to the directions isn't going to get you there. You actually have to execute consistently over time, following to get to the path. So, it's really easy to get caught up in setting a goal, or getting caught up in, what do I need to do to drive sales? And then we forget, we really need to look at, where are we going first? So where are we going? So if time and money wasn't a consideration, what would you be doing with your life? So if you didn't have to worry about time, you didn't have to find time anymore. Time was available, and you didn't have to worry about money. Money wasn't your big consideration. Now, you're always going to have ups and downs in your money, but if money and time weren't your biggest considerations, what would you be doing with your life? I've asked this to a lot of clients, and I've gotten everything from, I would be traveling. I would be spending more time with my kids, and, really making sure that when they're out of school that I was really focused on them. Some people are like, well, actually, I would not be with my kids. I want to go spend more time doing this other thing. We've had people say that they want to go on missions. There is no wrong answer. So when my mentor asked me this, it really made my mission really clear, because I was going in a million different directions. We had our Amazon business. We had this agency that we were building. We were speaking on the completely different route, talking about, doing speaking gigs in the Think and Grow Rich space. And we were doing all of these other things. I had a million projects. And when she asked me that, and my answer was, it felt pretty immediate at the time. I would be helping other entrepreneurs and helping people launch businesses. That's what I love to do. And I love figuring out the problem. And she's like, okay, so then we need to get rid of these other businesses that are going to distract you from that mission. Or, so if there's a side business that's going to give you the capital to get there, then that's one thing. But other than that, if anything that's not taking you towards the direction that you want to go, anything that's going to pull you away from your end goal, we need to trim that from your life. Mike McAllowitz in the Pumpkin Plan, he talks about, if you wanted, pumpkin farmers would try to grow one really big pumpkin. And that really big pumpkin was what everybody wanted to come see. And so it was basically like their biggest piece of marketing collateral. And so, when they get these special seeds so they could grow these giant pumpkins, and they would cut all of the other, as the vine was growing, they would cut any pumpkin that they didn't think could be the biggest pumpkin off the vine, because they wanted their biggest pumpkin to get the best nutrition, all of this, the sunlight and the water, and, all of the things that, we wanted to make sure it was all going into this one big pumpkin. So sometimes when I'm looking at somebody's business, what I see is they have too many pumpkins on the vine. And the result is none of them are really growing well. So we want to make sure that it's good to have multiple streams of income. And I recommend that once you have one solid one, that you can branch out to a second and then to a third. But you want to make sure you're doing that in a strategic way, because if you try to grow them all at once, it's easy for them all to start to wither on the vine. So the next question I want you to ask yourself is, what is your freedom number? So if you took the cost of living now, so the cost of your house, the cost of your health insurance, the cost of your grocery bills, then we add, all those things that are in the things that you want to be able to do in the future. So that could be, your kids' college tuition. It could be that quarterly trip that you want to take to, visit different crazy places around the world, whether it's, the Philippines, or you want to go to Botswana and Nova Scotia and all of these places. So if you have a car or a boat or another doodad that you want, and how much that's going to cost. So my mortgage is $1,500 and my grocery is this, and if we're going on a trip once a month, so that total. So our freedom number is, we really need to get to the point where our businesses are generating, businesses are generating, $7,000 or $12,000. It's going to be different for different people. Some people live pretty simply, so they're not going to need as big of a number as somebody who maybe lives in, if you live in Malibu, your number is going to be a lot higher than somebody living in Tennessee. And as you're looking at somebody in Tennessee's business and somebody in Malibu, you have to remember that their numbers and all of the pieces that go into that are going to be different, because their freedom number is different from yours. So it's not an apples to apples comparison. So what I usually ask in order to kind of get to where we want to go is, how much does your business need to pay you? How many employees do you want? And we're talking 2-3 years down the road. And what specifically do you want to be doing in your business? So, if you love sourcing, then maybe you still want to be sourcing, or maybe you want to be sourcing only 10 hours a week. And how much money do you want invested in your business? Are you okay with $250,000 in your Amazon business? Are you okay with $5 million in your Amazon business? All of these things are going to tell us what kind of business to build. Because if you tell me, we're doing a coaching call or something, and you say, well, I want to have no more than 3 employees, and I need my business to yield me like $7,000 a month, but I know that I don't want to have more than $100,000 invested in my business really at any point in time. I think that would make me nervous. Then we're not going to build a low margin wholesale business, because you're going to have a warehouse that has a lot of employees, that you'd have to have a lot more capital tied up into this. So, once you have this piece, as you're looking at, well, should I do RA? Should I do this? Should I change? Should I stay the same? That's going to give you some ideas of, which path should you take, because now you know where you want to go. So it's going to tell you, you're going to be able to say, this is going to actually take me further away from where I ultimately want to go. Because, if I get a warehouse and hire 10 employees, then I know, 3 or 4 years down the road, I'm going to want to get rid of it. And how am I going to fire all those people when they didn't do anything wrong? So we have to remember also that our business should be there to serve you. You do not exist to keep the business alive. We need to monitor the health of each business. And sometimes people will say, well, my business, I don't want to take any money out of my business. Action expresses priorities. So if you cannot put yourself first over your business to at least a small degree where you're pulling out $100, then that priority in that business of you serving that business is going to stay the same. Now, it's not like some magical thing, like you pull a salary and it changes your entire business. But we want to make sure that you're building your labor costs into your business while you're small. Otherwise, you will hit a wall and have to rebuild a lot as you get larger. So if you think your time is free right now and you're counting that time as free right now, then that's okay for right now, but you need to be building a plan to slowly build those labor costs into your items. At some point, you're going to get tired of sourcing. You're going to get tired of packing for most of you. And so you're going to want to hire at least a part of that out. So we're going to need to build the cost of that labor in at some point. And if you're planning on taking over the world, then we need to do that right away. Because in order to scale really fast, you need a lot of capital and you need to be able to outsource quickly so that you can have that growth be sustainable. So we want to begin with the end in mind. So we want to intentionally build the business that we want and avoid building a business that will hate or be a prison cell. To do that, we were going to be really clear on the goals and celebrate the wins. And for those of you who are like, when is she going to get to the good stuff? When it comes down to some of the more tactical stuff, we're getting close to it, okay? For teams and solopreneurs, some of these pieces are going to, like when I read 4 Disciplines of Execution, at first I thought it was a book that wasn't for me because we didn't have a big team. But these principles actually work really, really well with a small team as well. And you can find an accountability partner. People always say, well, should I pay for a mastermind? Or, if you can find a real mastermind. And a real mastermind, Napoleon Hill is, that concept of that mastermind. He said, it's when you get multiple people together, it creates not just the synergy, basically creates a mastermind. And in traditional mastermind, usually you're going to have people that are in different industries that are not specifically competing against you, so that you can share really freely. If you can't get into one of those and you're looking at trying to just get an accountability partner, then find somebody in Amazon that maybe has a different sourcing method than you. But most importantly, I would pick 2, make it at least a triad, maybe a group of 3 to 5, and have one person that you're really kind of a little bit scared of, that you would really hate for them to be disappointed in you, or somebody that you want to impress. And then have one person that you really care about and you really, really want to see them win, because the person that you're scared of will make you get that homework done, because you don't want to look bad in front of them. And the person that's there that you really want to help, that will be the person that gets you on the call even though you didn't do your homework, because you want to make sure that they got their homework done. So building those 2 cross pieces in your accountability groups will help them sustain longer. And find people that have the same level of drive as you. So if you're looking to build a $40 million business, you're going to get frustrated with somebody who's a hobby seller, not because they're not a great seller, but because the things that you need to do for your business are very, very different than what they're doing for their business. And so you can't really run at the same pace. So I talked at the beginning about that one thing. So what is the one thing? But if you meant this one goal would take care of or greatly diminish the need for every other goal. So if you took care of this one thing, and that one thing made it so, you would, like, pretty much everything in your business was taken care of. And when I first read that, I was like, well, that's stupid, because there's so many things in our businesses that have to be taken care of. How can you just pick one? But then what I really looked at was, that it was a lot more than that. That it was really, sorry, I got distracted. That it was a lot more than that. That if we have, I started to think about our Amazon business specifically. And with our business specifically, I started to think, okay, so with our Amazon, what would be the thing that if I solved that problem, all the other problems would kind of fall in line? And I thought about it for a while, and I started to really, I really feel that for our business, the most important thing, that when we've not taken care of this, the business starts to wobble. And when we have done a really good job on this, the business starts to do really, it's at its healthiest. And that is, profitable, consistently turning inventory. If I make sure that I am consistently increasing the amount of inventory at Amazon that is turning on a regular basis, a lot of the other problems all kind of work themselves out. Because in getting that one goal done, most of the other things just start to fall in line. Now, it's not a cure-all, but it gave me one place to focus. Now, 4 Disciplines of Execution actually says that you can have 2 wildly important goals. So they have a different definition. They're calling it the wildly important goals. And it says that a wildly important goal has to be something that will win the war that you're fighting. So if, so the hotel that my sister's works for is in a big PR crisis. They were mentioned in that Times Me Too article and a whole bunch of other things. And so, they're really fighting a big PR battle. So for them, it's not about revenue. It's about, changing the conversation about some of the things that are going on in that organization. So for them, their wig might not be revenue based. For them, their wig might be about really, getting positive stories about the company and making sure the company is a healthy, positive place to work for. So it might not be revenue. So, and it says that, so on these wildly important goals, the senior leaders can veto, but they don't set the wig. So if you were going to have, basically each team has this wildly important goal. So let's say I have myself, and then I have a team of 5 shoppers, and I have a team of 3 packers. So if then I would say, tell the packers, you guys pick your wig, and the shoppers, you pick your wig, and I'm going to pick my wig as the executive branch, basically. And they're going to pick their wig, and I might say, oh, that doesn't quite fit. You know, I can veto, but they need to set the wig because they need to have ownership in it. Nobody likes being assigned a goal. So they have to be able to kind of develop it themselves. And all wigs have to have a finish line. So the format, the formula of the wig, according to the 4 disciplines of execution, is from X to Y by when. So you might say, well, that's all good, but we still have all the things that are day-to-day that we have to deal with on a regular basis. I mean, how are we going to really deal with all of those things that come up here and there and, you know, are constantly pulling my attention? And so one of the things that he says in the book is that we're not talking about narrowing the size and complexity of your whirlwind, although over time, attention to your wildly important goals might have that effect. Your whirlwind includes all of the urgent activities that are necessary for you to sustain your business day to day. Focusing on the wildly important means narrowing the number of goals that you're attempting to accomplish beyond the day-to-day demands of your whirlwind. So, excuse me. So we're going to do intense focus on fewer goals. So your brain you can leverage your brain's capacity to concentrate superbly on one goal while still being aware of the other priorities. So that right now, we have a couple clients that we've had this conversation this week where we said, right now you're like a flashlight, your beam is really wide, and we need to bring your focus in to 1 or 2 things that you're going to really kick behind at, and those 2 things are really going to drive the growth in your business. And then once you started really kicking behind in these 1 or 2 things, then we can start outsourcing and managing those out. And then you can pick a third. But it's really, really focusing on one. So like an air traffic controller, all of the planes that are taxiing and taking off and the weather and they've got a million things on their screen. But when they're focused on landing a plane, they are focused on that one plane. They still have to keep an eye on everything else, but they're focused on making sure that one plane gets landed. And that's what these wildly important goals are designed to do. They're to say, yes, everything else is important, and we have to manage those things in order to be able to make sure that that plane can safely land. But before we do that, we need to really focus, and while we're doing that, we need to focus in on what is it going to take to actually get that plane on the ground or in the air. So defending against the whirlwind. So the whirlwind, again, is all those things that take away from your natural ability to focus. You can spend 80% of your time on the whirlwind and still be okay. So you're going to still have to deal with, you forgot boxes and that vendor canceled, and your items that were supposed to go out before Chinese New Year are now not coming before Chinese New Year. All of those things are still going to happen, and trying to schedule out, your entire days is not going to work because the whirlwind will creep in. I'm a big believer in time blocking, but I also think you can't schedule the whole day. You can say, I'm going to work on admin things here. I'm going to set time to work on different pieces, but you have to give room for the chaos and letting the chaos, you can't let it run rampant, but say, I have a business and it's kind of this living thing. And so there's going to be some chaos in it, but we're going to set aside just 20% of your time. So just a little bit of your time every day, or, a couple days a week, having a bigger block a couple days a week where you're going to really focus on those wildly important wigs. So those wildly important goals. So traditional goals that we see a lot are like to get more wholesale accounts, to increase replens, start utilizing PPC. I want to grow my revenue. I want to make $1 million. And when people say I make $1 million, they usually are meaning I want to gross $1 million. There's nothing wrong with the goals in and of themselves, but the problem is they're not, we talked about those components of a SMART goal: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-oriented. Those pieces would make it a little bit better. But when we have this wildly important goal or a SMART goal, basically we're saying, I know where I am and I know where I'm going, and by when I'm going to get that accomplished. I have objective ways to measure it. And so that's going to give me much more control into figuring out how I can actually make it happen. How can I get it to really go? So with the wildly important goal, here's an example: to go from $100,000 to $150,000 in net profit by the year end of 2020. So I'm going from here to there by when? So X to Y by a certain time. Here's another example: to increase our number of wholesale lines with gross revenue at least $2,000 per month and 50% or higher ROI from 3 to 10 by June 2018. So I'm going from here to there by a certain date, and I've been very clear on what objectively is going to be the thing that I'm measuring. Now, here's the thing that I think has stopped a lot of our clients. And so we had one client a couple years ago that we couldn't figure out what was going on, because one week she would be super, super excited. She'd be like, I'm going to work hard. This is going to be my year. And she would work really, really hard for a week or maybe 2 weeks. And then she would check in and she would say, you know what? I'm not getting anywhere. I just feel like maybe I'm doing something wrong and I just need to pull back in my business. And so she would kind of pull back for a week or two. And then we would get a really excited call about a week and a half later. And she said, you know what? I really think this is going to work. And she was going on this cycle. And I was like, what is going on? It's like she's, on a roller coaster. And she was, because what she was looking at is, I worked really, really hard this week and my gross sales didn't go up. My gross sales, I worked really hard and my gross sales are the same. What she wasn't the piece that she was missing is that in all sourcing models, we have to send them into Amazon. Before we get paid, things don't all sell the same day. So the work you do today doesn't show up on the scoreboard of gross revenue for 2, 3, 4. If you're PL, it might be 6, 8, 10, 12, even longer, right? I talked to somebody who's developing a brand last week, and her order is being processed, and we're really hoping that it might be in production maybe by October. And the factory is already working on it, but she has a lot of moving pieces. And so the work that she does today, she's not going to see gross sales for a really long time. So how do you stay motivated when it's so far away? So they talk about the idea of lead actions versus lag actions. So a lead action is let's start with lag action. So a lag action would be something like revenue, how much money you have at Amazon, the number of wholesale clients that you have right now. They're all things that are results, but they're not things that that are not directly influenceable and predictive of that growth, or predictive from what you did that day. So there's a lag, a time gap between when you do things and when they show up on the scoreboard. A lead action is going to be things that you do now that you have control over, and then you take that control, and that these items are going to, if I do these items, it is predictive. It is predictable that these items are going to, if I do these things consistently, it's going to cause this specific result. So that, for most of you, it's going to be, this is how much so when we were doing RA and even wholesale, we really focused on the amount spent, especially for retail arbitrage and online arbitrage. So how much did we spend a day at this ROI? When we moved to wholesale, it was how many calls did we make? How many price lists did we get? Price lists are a little hard because you can't really control how many price lists you can get, but you can control how many emails, you can control how many calls you made. You can control how many boxes you shipped. If they're, so if somebody's in your shipping department and your job is to provide them consistent inventory, they can control how many boxes they ship in a day, as long as there's quality inventory in there for them to ship. So this is an image from the 4 disciplines of execution. This is their image. So your lead measures are predictive and influenceable. So this lag measure is still important, because what it does is it checks to make sure that the thing we're doing over here is actually getting us the result that we want. Because if you just focus on this, you might have this wrong and you're putting a lot of effort and not getting anything in. Because if we get one of these 2 arrows wrong, it's not going to work. So basically, we're looking for actions that if I do it, it's predictable that I'm going to get this result. And if I do that action, I have complete influence over whether or not that job, that task, that metric gets met. So it's predictive and influenceable. So in 4 disciplines, the first discipline is a wildly important goal. Second discipline is the lead and lag measures, right? And then the third is to create a compelling scoreboard. And this is where a lot of people start to fade off. They're like, well, I don't need a scoreboard. It's just me and my husband, or it's just me. But the idea of having a compelling scoreboard is you want to be able to check your progress. So if you've ever tried to lose weight, so this would be the equivalent of the Weight Watchers weigh-in. So keep having that scoreboard is going to be able to tell you whether or not you're moving in the right direction. So when, we talked about these goals that aren't that great way back here, a lot of the time the reason they don't work is because we're doing something like, well, I want to lose 50 pounds. And maybe we even say, I want to lose 50 pounds by the end of 2020 because okay, so Brianna is getting married next New Year's Eve. So let's say I want to lose 30 pounds before Brianna's wedding or this coming New Year's Eve. Well, then when it comes down to today, I'm going to, well, do I want some more of those Reese's Pieces things that we had left over from our event, or do I not? And do I want to have another glass of water or an apple? Since it's so far away, I don't see the immediate consequences. Now, with the compelling scoreboard, this is the equivalent of weighing myself as I'm going to the gym, right? So I can say, well, okay, so my lead actions are I'm going to not eat more than this many calories, and I'm going to make sure that my Apple Watch says that I have burned at least as many calories as I have taken in. The weighing of myself once a week or twice a week would tell me, is the thing that I think that is making a difference, that, eating less, moving more, actually making that result happen. So it gives us that check-in point. Now, if you have a team, this is how you get everybody involved into the team, for them to be able to stay engaged. And again, if you set those lead measures where they're not influenceable, they're gonna disengage. So if you say, I made this mistake once. I was like, okay, we're going to base this off of how profitable we are after a certain time period. Well, but then when they saw me making different business decisions that maybe they didn't understand, they're like, see, she's spending money, and then I don't have control over the profitability of the company if she's going to spend money over here. So you want to make sure they have complete control over the lead measures that you're measuring them against. And same for yourself. And your team has to know whether they're winning or not. And the scoreboard should be designed for the players and not for the management. So the idea is, if you're playing a game, so if you've ever watched kids play basketball when we're not keeping score, and then the same kids play basketball when there's a scoreboard and there's an audience, it's a different game. You can say whatever you want to say about keeping score, but my son is not competitive. He's not, I want to win, but my son is, he's like just pretty easygoing. But if we're playing Nerf guns and we're just kind of getting each other, then it's a different game than if we're like 3 hits and you're out. Then, the way he plays is different. The way that he reacts to other team members is different because he's keeping score. So keeping score changes the way you play. And having that compelling scoreboard keeps you consistently playing at that higher level over time. That compelling scoreboard also keeps the whirlwind from starting to eat your goal. Because that's what I see happen. People get really excited. They're going to focus on this new thing, or they're going to try this new OA method or something along those lines. And they get 4 or 5 weeks into it. And then all of the things that just are all over, the day-to-day things that just start to swoop in and create this fog until you can't see it anymore. By having that compelling scoreboard and where everybody can keep track, we can say, I feel like the fog is rolling in and we need to really refocus in on that scoreboard. So the hardest part, according to the book, and I think too, is gathering the data for the scoreboard. So you have to think about, how would we gather data on some of the lead measures that you've brainstormed, or that you might brainstorm later. So here's some example lead measures that we've looked at. Is how much did you spend? how many hours did you spend scanning? The number of items that you scanned, the number of tactical arbitrage searches that you had, the number of items that you uploaded into Price Checker 2. The number of actions that so I have some of my PL clients, what they are starting to do is they're starting to basically develop a game where different pieces in the process of building a product, they're assigning points to. So like product research is 1 point, and like calling the manufacturer to get the price for the sample is this many points. And so they're like, I need at least 5 points on my private label products, and they're setting rules for themselves like, okay, I can't have more than 3 products that I'm really focusing on at one time. So the lead measure should be something that is influenceable and predictive. So if I predictably, if I have, if I'm making 100 wholesale calls a day to really qualified leads, then it's predictive that within 2 or 3 months, I'm going to have a lot of wholesale companies that I could do business with, right? And if at the end of that month, we see that result did not get that thing, we have to say, was it something wrong with the calls? Was it the wrong lead measure? Maybe we're looking at the number of dials that you made, but we really need to look at, I need to spend 100 minutes on the phone with somebody. So you're going to have, you'll be able to adjust it to make sure it works for your team and works for you. That fourth discipline is that cadence of accountability. And he says you should have a weekly meeting the same day of the week, should be a high priority, and this helps you defend against the whirlwind for the same reasons that we just talked about with the fog. So what that does is it gives you consistent focus on that wildly important goal, because if you block out a small portion to focus on your wigs in your week, then you're going to be able to make that forward motion. So, and in my understanding of how I wanted to implement this in my business, I kind of look at the wigs as the things that are going to drive the growth to the level that I want it to. And then the whirlwind is still going to get managed. I'm still going to be working on processes. I'm going to still be working on optimizing. But when I'm focused on my wigs, that's when I'm really focusing on driving the growth or driving the increased profitability, or decreasing the number of hours I'm working so I can pull out of that business and refocus into a new business. So we want to make that time consistent. It doesn't have, my schedule is all over the place. I tried to sign up for Dave Ramsey's, their version of Momentum where they have group calls, but you have to do like every third Thursday. I don't have a third Thursday that works for me. I'm traveling, I'm doing all these things. And for a lot of you, it's the same way. You don't have, a certain time that you can focus on things. It doesn't mean it has to be the same time, same bat channel, but it does mean that, you're saying that this wildly important goal is so important that I'm going to make sure that I have 10 hours a week where I'm really focused on this, or 3 hours a week where I'm really focused on this. And because it doesn't take as much time as you would think. If you can get really focused time, the results that you can get in a small period of time are phenomenal, right? So the idea is smaller number of focal points. So we're focusing on fewer goals with an increased intensity. So you might be like, okay, well, how am I going to figure out all the time to do this? And I thought this image came up. I thought it was perfect. Are you too busy to improve? And he's got the little block wheel instead of, when there's real wheels, like round wheels that he could be using, but they're like, oh, we're too busy to improve because I'm focused in on, trying to get this done right now. So you still have to deal with the whirlwind. And you might find that part of the whirlwind, in order for you to get to your goal, you're going to have to clean up some systems, and you're going to have to maybe organize and increase efficiency in order to make the time to focus on this wig. If you're already overwhelmed and already maxed out and you still want to grow, then first we have to make time in the day. So the only way you're going to make time is either by hiring somebody out. And if you hire somebody to work on a process that is not efficient, it's going to be a disaster. It's going to be an expensive disaster. Trust me, if you're not ready to hire, you have to have a system to put them into, right? So you have to hire somebody, or you need to get your own self more efficient. So you can, you can say, I need to find a way to save 3 hours in another piece of my business so that I can focus on this wig. And so, maybe I'm going to spend part of this week looking at, where can I save 3 hours? So the wigs are going to focus on growth, and the systems are going to give you more time to work on that growth. People will ask, how can we do, do I do all these things? Honestly, I don't. I mean, I have a really great team. But a lot of it is, there's a lot of systems, there's a lot of automation. I do work really hard, but I really love taking a look and trying to figure out where can we get things more efficient. So to build more streams, first, we need to master what you do right now. So if you are an RA person, you need to be the master of RA at that particular store. You need to outsource the easy stuff. Or, you might say, I don't want to hire anybody. That's okay. As long as you're running as efficient as you can as a solopreneur, then that's fine. Not everybody needs to outsource. In fact, some of the biggest sellers have very small teams. So you don't have to have a giant team to be large either, right? So you want to use that time to systemize the hard stuff. The time that you free up, we're going to systemize some of the hard stuff. You'll be surprised what you can outsource after you get a little bit more experience in creating kind of those if-then statements. And if you're in the academy, we have a 26-page document of some of our best practices for our Amazon business that you can use as a starting point. And if you see something in there that's out of date, or just let us know and we'll update it, right? So building efficiency is how you add to the additional streams of revenue. So you don't just add more streams because you think it's time to add streams. Before you can say, well, I think it's time for me to add a new stream of income, we have to say this stream of income is healthy and can run on its own, and then I'm going to start a new stream. The pitfall of not doing that and just saying, well, this is the shiny new object, this is what I'm going to do, is your main business that was generating income that you were surviving on will wither, while you focus on the new thing that you're excited about that's getting your best energy. So if you are doing that, then what I would recommend is that you set yourself some guidelines that says, I only work on the shiny object after the meat and potatoes of my revenue producing business, my profit producing business is done first. Then I can focus on my new toy. So I'm going to share a little bit about how we developed that scaling retail arbitrage thing in the academy, and basically how we started to be able to source as much as we were doing retail arbitrage. So we had really consistent growth. We did really well right out of the bat our first year. We did $180,000 in gross sales, and that was before people were doing big numbers, and I didn't really have any idea what we were doing. And we started with literally like no money. So we had no capital. We had no way to really borrow money. But then we got stuck. I actually remember messaging Angie Short Cranford, asking her, how do I get past this point? Because it seemed like no matter how hard I worked, we were still stuck at $25,000 a month. And I was working harder and harder, but I just wasn't moving past it. So one night I was trying to figure out why we were stuck. So what I started to do is I started to reverse engineer. I was like, okay, so we have this much inventory and we're making this much in sales. So if I wanted to double that amount of how much sales we have, then if I doubled the amount of inventory plus a little, then that would probably get me to where I want our revenue to be. As long as we keep our margins at the same level, then that should get us to where we need to be profit-wise, so that, I can, that we can, whatever goal we were trying to reach at that time, right? So I figured out how much I had to spend in order to have that much inventory. So I said, okay, so now I know this is how much inventory I need to have in order to have 50,000. I'm going to round that way up. And then, so, at how much my ROI I'm having right now, that means I need to spend this much. So every week if I divide that by 4, I need to spend this much. And that's where really the basis of that whole best from the nest /calc, that calculator of, figuring out how much to spend, that really came from chicken scratch and like random notebooks all over the house. So then we looked at that number, and this is about as close to an actual photo of me as I finished doing those calculations. And I was like, wah, wah. I'm like, how could I ever source that much in a week? Because I think it was triple what I was sourcing at the current time. And I was like, because we were doing mostly clearance orders, there's no way we're going to be able to get that much in items. I don't see how it's possible. So I started thinking about, okay, well, how can I source better? So the first thing I did is I was like, okay, so where can I save just a little bit time? Because if I could just spend more time sourcing, but I couldn't add any more time because I had young kids and they were at home. In fact, I was homeschooling my kids at the time because they were still in preschool, and my daughter was like, I want to say like less than a year old, or maybe a year and a half old. And so what I did was I was like, okay, so I only have so much time. So how can I make when I can source so I can source faster? And so I started thinking, well, I'm spending a lot of time in stores scanning the things that I know I think I want to buy again to make sure they're still good. So what if I did those at home? And so we started with a replen list. The things, so I went into my inventory health report, and this is something we still recommend clients do. We went into our inventory health report, and I looked for everything that had like over 100 items that we had sold, of that one unit. And I basically created a replen list, because those things, I figured if I had sold at least 100 units of them, then that means I had been buying them over and over again. So I should be checking them on a regular basis. So we created a replen list from there. And so then I was like, okay, well, what if I could take that up a notch? Because that honestly was, we were able to increase how much we were able to source so much. And I got so much of my time back that what we started to do is like, okay, how can we accelerate this? So I started to create master lists of everything that was in the stores that we sourced at, with the exception of like grocery aisles and, or refrigerated aisles and things that we couldn't sell. So if we created a master list of the stores, we started to basically treat those retail arbitrage stores like a wholesaler that wouldn't give us the list, that basically let us in the warehouse and said, you have to make the list yourself. And then I kind of stumbled on a honey hole. We were out and about traveling, and I found this amazing honey hole, and I found a bunch of other honey holes that were right around it. And so we created master lists of everything that were in these different stores. And I kind of built a little specialty around stores that didn't have UPC codes. But I'm not shopping at any of them anymore. But for a long time, that was really how we did it, is we found something with a barrier to entry. So some of them had no UPC codes, or some of them were like really deep inside the mall. And so anybody sourcing there would have to walk items out really far away, or we tried to find things that have regional things. So we tried, and now if I was doing it today, I would be specifically looking for things that tactical arbitrage can't reach. All love to Alex, but you want to try to stay away from, I was looking for things that had a barrier to entry for other sellers. So the unexpected benefits, because I knew we would get sourcing, better at sourcing. And so we did end up hitting our goal. But we avoided a lot of the price tanking that we saw other sellers dealing with, because we were able to watch these items over time. We were able to see how some things, even though the rank didn't meet our original criteria, if we expanded it, because we were able to watch them, we were able to expand our criteria so much that we were staying away from everything else. And also, when everybody else was going to that July Target clearance, we were still focused on our replens. And so while all the prices were tanking over there, we were safe over in our area. I went from sourcing 32 hours a week to sourcing 4 to 6, sourcing about 4 hours a week over 6 months. And our average ROI went up about 25%. And we were able to find a lot of inventory with a really small team. And the team that we did have, I didn't have to train them nearly as much, so I could, even Gabe, who was in our warehouse for a long time, I could send he and Rochelle I did this actually, I was at a conference in Florida, and I just gave them $50,000 and I said, go spend it. And they had a list of $80,000 of items to buy. So they spent $50,000. By the time I got back from Florida, it was all shipped and in, and everything was bought according to my buying criteria, because I had approved the list before they went out. So all of the items and how many to buy. And our team was so used to doing that, I was able to do that at a very large scale. So streamlining. So what we did is we focused on the replens. We did this slowly over time. And as we built the replens, then we cut the clearance. So people are asking, like, how can I move into wholesale, or how can I move from one to another? This is how we did it. But you might say, and so really, what a difference that 28, all those time that I didn't spend outsourcing, we were able to spend more time doing a lot of other things. And that allowed to toggle between retail arbitrage and wholesale, depending on where the market was. And we were able to find new honey holes. But let's be honest, that was years ago. So the circumstances have changed, but not the methods. So the circumstances of what we were trying to avoid and how we would do it have changed, but not the method. The method of saying, oh, how can I make this more systemized, and how can I stay farther away from the herd? Those things are still the same, and you're still able to do those today, because we're still doing those things today. That's how we're staying alive. So, mastering, you want to master, then streamline. Then use the time that you get from that mastering and streamlining to bring on a new stream. And I would recommend that you go with proven streams, and you have to move faster and harder than your competition. So if you want to be complacent, maybe being in e-commerce isn't for you, because sometimes you're going to have to push. There's going to be moments where you're going to have to push really, really hard. And I think people think once you hit a certain plateau that things get easy. The roller coaster just gets bigger. So your highs get higher and your lows get lower. And, the other thing is that, you're going to hit, it's kind of like if you look at a stair step, like each time you make that jump from one level to another, it's like you're being stretched like a rubber band to your very maximum, and it's painful and it's stressful, and you're not sure if it's going to work out. And what if you break this thing that you built? So I have all of those feelings still today as I jump from one level of revenue to another in our different businesses. So know that is not going to go away, and it's okay to kind of grieve that. Because I asked my mentor one day, I was like, so when does it stop being so scary? And she said, it never stops being so scary. You're always going to have a little element of fear, but you're never starting over again. Worst case scenario, you always know more than you did before. So here's what we recommend. That you look for that 80-20 in your business, and you max out that 20 with systems and really intense focus. And the only way you're going to do that, set those wildly important goals and clear out some time for them. Now, you don't have to do it like a wildly important goal. There's a million ways to do this. This is just one path. Start contacting companies consistently, whether you're looking at new OA companies that maybe don't have XPass for TA, or you're contacting new manufacturers, or you're talking, to different wholesale clients. Build some case studies of how you're doing it, and then you're going to look at those case studies and you're going to accelerate your growth, because now you have those systems in place. So, some of the things that we use systems. We use Asana plus Zapier. Zapier is ZAP, P as in Paul, ZAPIER. Another alternative is If This Then That. So it's IFTT, I think. I always get those acronyms messed up. But so we use this to keep ourselves basically keep ourselves organized. So this is obviously a training demo, but on this board, basically what we made up. These are not real leads that we're working right now, but you put in the different leads, and then as we're working on them, they would move through this piece. So you could do this with OARA. We've done this with OARA, pretty much everything but private label, because most of our private label is done for us by our wholesale clients, by our wholesale vendors. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and open it to questions. If you guys, I hope that it was valuable. And then I wanted to let you guys know, so go ahead and if you have a question, or if you're completely lost, you may like, I didn't understand any of that, then let me know, because then I can go back and fix it. I can't fix it if I don't know. But we're also going to be doing a webinar with Rhian on Sunday night. And it's going to be 5 tips on wholesale for Amazon. Rhian did $3.6 million on Amazon last year. So we're going to have a Q&A, and he'll be able to do some tips with that, and that is Sunday. But I don't see any other questions. Are things broken? Did you guys not hear any of it? Now I'm nervous. Somebody type something, or I'm going to start freaking out. Okay. Whew. Like when you have that panic, you're like, wait, no. Did I just do an hour where nobody could hear me and I was muted? You guys really scared me. Okay. And I know it's kind of a lot, so we will have a replay, and just kind of sit on it. So, make sure that as you're looking at this, you're looking at the end in mind. So make sure I know it seems like, it can seem a little rah-rah, like vision the tree you want to be. And, that some of us aren't like that. But if you really know where you want to go, you're going to get there. And people will ask, well, how is it that this person or this person was able to go from nobody to this huge $1 million seller? And without fail, for the most part, it's all pretty much that they took massive, massive action. And a lot of times is they were able to build those systems into those actions, so they were able to scale it much faster. Lisa asked, does the 4 disciplines have a workbook or a study along system? I believe it does have a workbook. The other thing, if you like 4 disciplines of execution, what I would do is I would Google 4 disciplines podcast, because the 4 disciplines of execution did have a podcast that was on Donald Miller and one that was on EntreLeadership. Both of those podcasts are actually really good podcasts. I want to say maybe they were on Faster Than Normal too. Faster Than Normal is a podcast by Peter Shankman. It's about entrepreneurs with ADD. So I kind of listen to that one sometimes. Let's see. Make sure I didn't miss anything here. All right. So I should put the link to the webinar in here for you guys too. Hold on. Let me see if I can. So Blair said he has a comment. I love your methods because you have, because it depends so much on systems. And, as somebody that, can have like ADHD, I found that I know what to do, but I get overwhelmed and have trouble executing, even though I know what to do. If this describes anybody else on the call, I found that the coaching specific to living with ADHD is helpful, and I would seek it out. So that's really good advice. So, because I think I found that too. I think the reason people think that I like systems because I'm a big nerd, and yeah, to a degree that is true. I am a total nerd. I mean, I'm actually in Star Wars pajamas and like a Disneyland shirt. So, I'm a total nerd. The podcast for entrepreneurs with ADD is Faster Than Normal. It's Peter Shankman. Some of them are awesome, and then some of them he's a little distracted, which is ironic, but they're all really good. They all have good pieces, but some of them I find myself getting a little lost because I think he got a little distracted, but that's me being judgy. And he just wrote a book on that. Let me see if I can pull up the link for that as well without showing you guys like store names or anything like that. Where did I'm trying to pull that up. You guys have, and I put in, I put in the wrong link there, so that was completely useless because I got distracted. I had one in there for Rhian, but I will post that in the Academy and I'll send it out in the replay. It's not letting me type, but Peter Shankman, Faster Than Normal. He's got a lot of good stuff that's out there. And I'm sure there's video. I saw him speak at PubCon. And Lisa says, I get hung up on the technology parts of my business, and it seems like creating SOPs and systems always requires that. So there's a low-tech way to create a system, and the low-tech way to create a system, I'm going to keep it as low-tech as we can. This is like super low-tech. So if you have an iPhone, you have an app called Voice Recorder. You're going to use the voice recorder, and as you do something, let's say somebody's PL and this is how I place a reorder with my manufacturer. I open my email, and so basically you're going to talk as you're doing it, talk through it, and say, I'm opening my email, I'm emailing jeff@iwantmystuff.com, and I'm putting the subject as da-da-da, and you go through the whole thing where you say the whole thing. And then if you're really low tech, you're going to save it and then you're going to type it out. If you're a little bit more tech, you can take one half a step up on the tech. You're going to upload that to rev.com or gotranscript.com, and they're going to transcribe it for you. Then you're just going to look at it, and you're going to, you can format it like a 1, 2, 3 step. And then I want you to just look at it and say, how could I make this 30 seconds faster? And, so, when we first started, looking at SOPs, what we kind of did is we kind of made an agreement that, in the office, so everybody, we have to get these SOPs written. We have to get these standard operating procedures written. So everybody bring a process at the weekly meeting. If you don't bring a process, you're volunteering to clean the bathroom. And nobody wanted to clean the bathroom, which was already something that was going on, right? So what happened is people brought those SOPs. And so once we had them, then we can say, okay, let's take a look at that SOP and let's see how can we make it 30 seconds faster. And sometimes, since we had everybody there, we would say, Gabe would say, well, this is as fast as it can get. And, maybe Rochelle would say, well, what if when I placed the order, if I forwarded you this and you had that ready? And so we were able to think a little bit creatively because everybody was able to get things, they were, so we were able to kind of move things around. And so just setting yourself some sort of deadline can help. So, and if you have, accountability calls with me, then that's something we can check you up on, right? So it's rev.com, rev.com, or gotranscript.com, and that is correct. And so you can do both of those things really, really easily. In fact, that's kind of how I wrote my book. Is I made a PowerPoint just like I was going to do a really long webinar, and then I recorded the whole thing on Rev, and then I took that transcript, and from there that I just kind of edited down to what I wanted my book to be. So if it sounds like I'm talking in my book, that's why. And the other thing that you can do, one of the stories because I'm speaking at Creativation on systems to scale tomorrow, and one of the things that I'm going to share is, and some of you guys have heard this before, is that we had one year where we were primarily toy sellers at the time, and I got I ended up with a kidney stone, 2 kidney stones. One was like as big as an iPhone, and so I had to have 2 surgeries, one in November and one in December, and so I was completely out for most of Q4. And so you would expect a certain result to see that in our sales, but our sales actually went year over year. I think it was up like 50%. And the reason that is because I was able to bring somebody on, since we had started that replan process. Somebody else was able to do those pieces for me. I already had somebody shipping for me. And then the person who was shopping, I was able to, because I had just enough of a system, I was able to keep everything running and humming while I was still, not really even thinking straight. So, if having these systems, even if it's just you, is going to give you 2 benefits. One is it gives you redundancy. If you get hit by a car, your plane gets late, all of those things. And then also it gives you the ability, as you want to grow, that you're going to be able to do that. But then also it helps you make you more efficient. Does anybody else have any other questions? I know we've been on for a little bit over an hour, so I don't want to keep you. I know that it is a busy time of year. We're going to have a couple other webinars that are coming up. I'll send you some information about that. Never any pressure to come, but just try to provide some different information. And I guess that is it. I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to assume you guys have got it. We'll get the replay out as soon as possible, and I really appreciate you guys spending your time with me. And if there's ever anything I can do for you, let me know. Thanks. Bye.